celebration of Northlight Art Center's Student Art Show. 10 years ago, I really didn't imagine we'd be doing this 10 years later. And Northlight Art Center began the idea for it in 2008. So ironically, with another time in our country's history, the Great Recession, where I found that the art centers I had been teaching at, some of them actually just closed unexpectedly and or really scaled down their operations. And at the same time, artwork wasn't selling. So I got to thinking, and having had experience with art centers, I got to thinking about starting my own. I at the time, if many of you know where the former video store was in Sharon, that building I could see from my office at home window. And so I got to thinking, if I could make that work, I will start my own school. And I put together a business plan. I figured out how to structure it. It helped that in that time, the real estate market softened, and so I could have a rent that was accessible and make taking lessons with me affordable for a range of people. And so that's what I did. I began in March of 2010, and taking my experiences. To back up a moment, I studied at, I graduated from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon as an art and art history major, but it wasn't until the 1990s that I studied at the Art Students League in New York that I got the training that I was looking to have, the foundational training of an artist. And that equipped me with a skill set to apply to my own work, but also to teach it. And I do love teaching and how it brings out what's in people, what they want to discover within themselves. As we'll see in the tour about to come up, realism is not a requirement. What I'm after is to find out what it is in each student and teaching to the individual what's in there that wants to come out, and to provide the skills to tap that expression. Okay, I think we're about ready to start. And
into your microphone.
So thank you. Waltraud, if you could mute your microphone here, that would help. Thank you. Okay, now for those of you familiar with Zoom, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, or all of us on the call, you'll see that for my screen, it's at the bottom center, an icon for chat. I invite you as we go to ask questions. I will read them, and we can just have a conversation about what we're looking at today. So, to begin with, we have a marvelous oil stick portrait painted by Kathleen O'Halloran, and I forget the name of this piggy, but Kathleen has a special way with animals, and she's a professional dog walker. Excuse me just a moment. And has a menagerie of her own. She now has roosters, and I don't know that she ever owned this pig, but she does these marvelous close-ups of these animals' faces, and I think just captures a wonderful, very loosely rendered expression of her subjects. Moving to the right, we have a pastel by Jan Stone that actually is a portrait of my palette, and a palette I designed and made back when I was at the Art Students League. And I think that this kind of subject matter for Jan is where she excels. There's an immediacy, and she's got a knack for finding these things in the studio to paint them. Last year, in last year's show, some may recall, she had a portrait of an easel with a dustpan and brush, which are just the stories of how we work in the studio. And at the end of the session, clean up. Okay, and I see a question happening. Jill, to everyone, that pig looks very happy. Sure does, Jill. Thank you for that. It's great to have you here. Okay, and I'm going to move this chat box where I can see. So, Kathy, and Kathy, you are on the call. Kathy came to me in a drawing workshop, a one-off, and I immediately saw an ability to draw. And so she's become a full-time student or ongoing student, and has done a series of lovely pastels with use of color and subject matter. We will see, I believe, more of Kathy's work in this show. And so I think maybe what we'll do is continue on and allow for a Q&A time afterwards. If we may go back one slide, please. Thanks, Chris. This work is by Gloria Miller. And Gloria is another of my old full-time wonderful students who I think perhaps more than anyone who's come through my doors is on an adventure to explore what's possible in not only subject matter, but how she approaches it. And she constantly surprises me with what she comes up with. She has done nebula. She has done jellyfish. This, which to me evokes a Chagall feeling, I think, in its organization of space, is a wonderful example of where she's gone with her work in the most recent time. I think we see just a beautiful use of color. I like the way these two images appear side by side on the screen. And by the way, I've not seen the show in person along like most of us, and we'll talk about that at the end when we can do that. I just think that Gloria's finding mystery and little bits of imagery we can identify with, something to grab onto, but then take us fuller into the mystery. Okay, next slide, please. On the left is another of Gloria's pieces, Cityscape. And I think that it just holds a vibrancy that is marvelous. And again, while we identify it, or I just did, as a cityscape, and I happen to know its origin, I think what we see here is an abstraction of color, tone, form, the things that the abstract artist really concentrates on. And this beautiful dynamic to it, the motion, the movement, these diagonals that pull us into this vibrant scene. Beautifully done. On the right, we have a pastel. And by the way, Gloria's works are also pastel, if I did not mention that. We have a pastel by Vivian Sukanik, And it is of turkey eggs that she discovered in her property in a field. And I think that Vivian has been on a quest to push her own boundaries and explore color. What I'm seeing here is a challenging use of the textures and spaces, the forms that I think give a certain chaos to nature that what I'm seeing here is met with a restive calm, seeing the shapes of the eggs. Okay, shall we go to the next slide, please? Anne Drager is another adventurer, always in her art. And I would say, actually, this is a piece, some of these pieces I have not seen before. What I did for the 10th anniversary celebration was to invite many alumni to enter into the show if they chose. And this is one of Anne's works. I don't know that Anne is on the call that she could explain what Tiki Tussle is, but I think we even see a URL at the bottom to www.creaturecomforts.com. So very curious. On the right, we have another work by Kathleen O'Halloran, McCallion. And it is also an oil stick. And it is derived from a trip she took to Ireland. And so for me, this, as she was working on it, I was calling it the Druid tree and identify with it in that way. What does that evoke? What do you feel when you paint this singular tree standing alone in a glen? Okay, to the next slide, please. Look at these are beautiful. On the left is an oil painting by Carol Timelot of two of her horses, a foal and its mare. The foal, in fact, has one blue eye and one dark eye. And I just love the way this is composed into a very sensitive relationship with mother and child, and the strength of the horse's neck, but the softness in her eye as she is with her foal. And then that super fuzzy snout nose of the foal. Just a really beautiful use of tones and softer palette. And again, this is Oil on Canvas by Carol Timelot. On the right, we have another of Kathy Kulig's pastels, and her animals are just marvelous. Their characters, I find a lot of humor in her subjects, moments that capture the silliness. And I think there's just a beautiful, delicate use of green that offsets the calf licking its nose. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we have on the left a pastel by Linda Wenkert, and Linda is a former student who I'm glad that she chose the invitation to be in the show, and it is Pastel. And I think that there's a wonderful expressive dynamic to the sky, a loose handling of the medium. And again, take a note of that diagonal of the road that leads us into the scene. That's a very effective device in composition. And I think we can look to see other examples of that in the show. On the right is another of Gloria's adventures. I believe, Gloria, this is Pastel, but this is also, I think, the piece where you used makeup. And not being familiar with makeup enough to know what aspect it is, I love the fact that she saw an opportunity in something not typically assumed to be an artist's material, except for face painting, I suppose. Beautifully done. Evoking more mystery than answers. I feel it's almost like a sultry summer night, yet at the same time, it could be, and I think related to her cityscapes. Okay, next slide, please. Rory Wheatley. I'm honored to say that Rory is homeschooled, and I am his art teacher. And he's just a terrific young man, full of vibrant ideas, mind always engaged, and we have a wonderful conversation going on about not just the techniques of the artist, but the philosophies. And I think, as everyone in my studio knows, I love science, and I love to bring the science of art making, but also in atmosphere and how that can inform our art making. I'm just looking at this, and I love the addition of the 3 balloons, their baskets. It's implying such a movement of atmosphere. And again, there is this element of the curve of the shoreline and the reduction in scale of the rocks on the beach, or they may be houses. I'm seeing it at a small scale. That lead us in. And as it arcs around, he's done a fine job of bringing us right into the heart of the composition. On the right is an oil on panel by Chani Wells, and it's just been a delight to watch Chani's skills as well as her subject matter evolve. And this lovely scene is from Chani's childhood as a young girl living in Cuba. And I believe we have here a plantation. I know from another of Chani's works, it's a family scene set in an orange grove. So now I can tell you, when you see this work in the show, it doesn't have quite the warm cast that it does on this slide. That is because I took the photo in the studio under artificial light. I think it works, but you'll see a difference in the actual piece when you do see the show. And I think there's just a wonderful simplicity to rendering of the children, and made all the more successful because of the softness of how she's treated the landscape, especially the foreground. We just immediately go right to the subject, put in the context of the palm trees, and it actually speaks to something I often teach, and that is what we are doing is working with the effects of light in the landscape. And it gets us thinking beyond labels of tree, children, sky, cloud. We start to see how a landscape and every subject matter is really illuminated by a light source. And much of the time it's a natural one, but it can be artificial too, or a combination of both. Johnny has done a wonderful job of giving this scene the atmosphere that I'm talking about. Next slide, please. Teresa Kenny, a pastel on the left of the screen. And this is one I'd not seen. I do recall Teresa working on this in the studio. Some students are every week showing up. Others may drop in as their schedules allow, and I get to see a bit of what they're working on. In fact, I believe both of these pastels are by Teresa, and so it's just a delight for me to see them. And no, actually, I see Linda's signature on the pastel on the right.
Oops.
So again, Teresa is using that device of the angle, the leading us in, and surrounded by the, I think, a wonderful interpretation of the textures of a garden. On the right, Linda Wenkert again, and that no doubt is the covered bridge in West Cornwall. A wonderfully loose handling, and I can really feel the cold, the chilliness of the day, and the snow falling. I think what really is a wonderful kind of payoff to this piece are the taillights within the bridge. That's really a nice touch.
Sorry, I'm getting that.
Okay. I think Judy may have a microphone on. So next slide, Chris, when you're ready. Okay. These are two pastels by Mary Harvey. And Mary has been with me for quite a few years. And I just love the execution of both of these. What she's done here actually is to paint an underpainting where one takes pastel and uses rubbing alcohol as a way to liquefy it and create fields of color underneath. Watercolor is also used that way. Then putting the pastel, which in all of these cases is considered soft pastel, not an oil-based. And a soft pastel can be as hard as a pastel pencil to something that is what we describe as being buttery, and it's just a delight to make marks with. Both of these scenes are by Mary, and you can see, and especially when you're at the show, take a look between the markings on the top and you'll see her underpainting. In the slide on the left, I can see in the sky, you see those rusty red notes. She did a wash as a contrasting color to then put the blues and whites of the sky on top of. And that creates a visual excitement doing that. I believe the work on the right by Mary is from a trip to Ireland. And well, again, I'll point out the use of compositional devices to lead the viewer on a journey. And it's more subtle on the pastel on the left, the edge of the dried grasses, the snow leads us in from lower right to middle ground left into the, then returns into the middle ground. Whereas on the right, Mary has done a terrific job of presenting a meandering path with options of how we can go. And we know that there is a path that will lead to the house in the distance. But she leaves us to question about the best way to get there. And I find it makes for a nice country stroll in that sense. Okay, next slide. Okay, Linda, this is on the left. I see Linda's signature, and again, a work I've not seen. This is a lot of fun for me to see these as well. I love the tonal use. This is about tone. There's a running joke in my classes that I'm often saying, no, you got to make it darker, darker, darker. And that is really just to build the confidence of how to render life, the appearance of life, and make things look 3D, what we call the modeling. And it's in that use of tones. Again, we see what looks like a brook is pulling us into the scene. And in the middle ground, beyond the dark trees, is a mysterious, I don't know, it's like a hoarfrost on tree branches or something, then pulling us up into the light in the sky. It's a marvelous borderline work of representing landscape and moving into abstraction. So on the right is a wonderful pastel by Patty Rossback. And Patty, again, has been with me in class since day one. I think she thinks my tea is pretty good. Patty is English. And so we've just had a wonderful time over the years, taking a break for tea and talking about one another's work. And we see here an intimate scene of lambs and their ewe. And Patty has done just a range of beautiful animal scenes and portraits. She has gifted and I believe has had some commissions. So she is an equestrian, and so when you see her horse paintings, you quickly see her familiarity with horses and equine anatomy and character. So I love the gentle simplicity of this scene. Next. Okay, look at this trio. I'm going to start with the one in the middle because we're familiar with Kathleen McCallion's pets. And so Kathleen spends much of her days dog walking. Sometimes I think a half dozen dogs, but at least a few. And she takes them up mountains around here and then has done a series of portraits of these dogs. And I do my best to remember the names of every pet that's being painted. And I think this is Rocky. as a matter of fact, but I could be wrong. And if Kathleen's on the call, she might correct me a little later on. But let's take a moment and look at the two pieces by John Frenkel. They are acrylic on canvas, just beautiful inspiration from windmills. And John has been with me now for many years, and I just always admire where he takes not only his work, but us on his journey to make his work. There's a fair amount of shape-shifting as he goes, and meaning given to various elements of a painting, which then may have another meaning the following week. But I just love the movement in these. I can feel the windmills turning as I look at these, and they evoke for me some of the works of Kandinsky. But that said, John's work is purely that. It's John's vision, and I'm just delighted that I've been able to encourage that vision over the years. Again, these are acrylic on canvas. And I'll mention now, too, that many of the works in the show are for sale. So and we can talk about that after the slideshow, when they will be available for viewing. Okay, what's next? Look at these two. These are both by Kathy Kulig. And again, her intimate scenes with wildlife. We see on the slide of the woodpecker on the left, a very delicate use of a soft background with an in-focus foreground, which just brings an immediacy to that moment of this young, what I believe is maybe a downy woodpecker. And then to the left, now I can let us all know that this slide is just a little out of focus. The actual work is like this slide on the left. The nest, the chick and or fledgling and the eggs are all in focus, again with the background in soft focus. This slide, this painting cracks me up every time I see it. Just you can hear that little fledgling making the loudest sound it can to be noticed, to be fed. A wonderful use of color and a concentration of it right in the center. You just wonder when its siblings are going to hatch.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
That's great. No, we're good. Thank you. Okay, another by Kathy Kulig, Tulips. And here we see, again through scale, the perspective pulling us in to the scene more fully. I think what is very important about this composition is that we have the diagonals of the rows and even the dirt path, which would technically lead us across and out of the picture before we actually get into the scene, to that red barn. But because of the figure, and because of the figure in black and white, acts as a fulcrum, which is another compositional device. It's a fulcrum, a weight present there that balances out that pull and flow to the right. And then I think it's further strengthened by having that figure facing the opposite way. And her momentum itself serves more as a counterbalance to the composition. So very nicely done. We have another oil on panel on the right by Chani Wells. And again, this is from, I know the source of this is from a black and white photo of her childhood in Cuba. And I just loved watching this develop. The intimacy of the scene, the family group, just on a beautiful day. This is in the orange grove. We can see the basket of oranges, and the gentleman in the background tending to the groves, and we see oranges on the ground. Make a note, take a look at the warm atmosphere to this, that there isn't blue sky. We get a sense of a sultry summer day, and with dappled light, the coolness of the shade, I think is just very effectively done. And the use of that palette around the figures, where the figures have the warmer, the brighter yellows and blues, and the darks, bring all of her subject forward and right to us. So we are actually, I feel, invited into a very gentle, private family moment. Next slide, please. Okay, look at these two. I love how these are arranged together. On the left is a pastel by Waltraut Macmillan. And Waltraut is fairly new to my studio. And I love the fact that she's got work in the show. I've always encouraged students to put work in the annual show, to have that experience, to experience what it's like to present your work framed to the public. One of the beautiful things about this show at Sharon Historical Society is that it's not necessary to have the work for sale. And so for many of the artists, they want these pieces for their own collection and keeping. And so it creates that option. So we see here a beautiful nocturne of moonlight across the water. I enjoy the simple arranging of shapes. This is one thing that we do as artists working on a two-dimensional surface, whether we make it look 3D or not, we are arranging shapes all the time. You know, even the sky is a shape to the painter. And Waltraut's done a fine job of presenting this ordered, put together landscape with just a touch of a bit of cloud in the sky and movement in the water. She's also done something that when you see the works and works of art, take a note of the edges between the shapes. And there's a saying that an edge is not a line, and that an edge is where two forms come together. And that can be crisp, delineated, which would imply it's a line, but also soft. We talk about lost and found edges, and Wally has done a terrific job of using those two qualities of soft, lost edges and hard, found edges, the way we see in the craters of the moon. On the right is a pastel by Teresa Kenny. And what a pair these two are. It's great to see them side by side. What we are seeing here is Teresa moving into a bolder abstraction. I see in it her awareness of mark making. We talk about how the pastel is applied, how the paint is applied. Each of those is a mark. And I think it's, while there's a connection between the two, the pair presents a nice example of a soft presentation and one that is more active and energetic. It comes at you, that middle ground, foreground, which is a landscape of a sort, but not with anything other than what looked like maybe steps going up. So I love this threshold of between representing something that we can identify with and abstraction. I think that's a wonderful playground for the artist. Next slide. Oh, we are there. Okay. Before I forget, and I hope some of you have questions, we can do a Q&A, but I just want to again thank Sharon Historical Society for hosting 10 years of Northlight Art Center's annual shows. And I will give a shout out to Liz Shapiro, who was the director of SHS 10 years ago, and inviting that very first show. I remember well over 100 people in attendance to the reception, and just feeling as I arrived and to see cars and a crowd, wow, I created this and it's a part of our town. And I'm just delighted that it has remained a part of town and the community in a much broader sense as well. And Sharon Historical Society has been so gracious in this, and I believe I saw Judy Albright on this call, and I want to thank Judy as well for two reasons. She was instrumental at Sharon Historical Society to creating the gallery that is there now and is just a wonderful space for art exhibits. Judy is also rare in my students in that Judy has gone on to teach, and better than when I set up Northlight Art Center originally, I devised it so that other artists could teach. They could have their block of time and teach their own subjects. And there was a period of activity doing that, children's classes, a variety of things. And really what it relies upon is an initiative on the part of the artist to make that happen. Well, Judy was a natural for that and ran classes at Northlight for many years. And she's now since moved to Vermont. We miss her. So I thank you, Judy, for all that you've done.
Thank you, Peter. It was a great experience. It's so great to be here and see all full work. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful. It's so good to hear you. So I've got some messages here. A message from Gloria to the one I talked about being makeup, and she's sharing that it is that entire piece is all mineral makeup. Gloria, would you like to tell us what mineral makeup is in just a minute or two?
Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Well, that was all the makeup from years ago, and some of it is actually minerals in little jars that I was getting ready to toss out. And then I said, well, what's a pastel? It's minerals. So I decided to experiment and use the pastels to make a picture, which is how I like to approach just about everything that I do in your art class. You know that. It's like fun, right? Fun. And who cares if you make a mistake or it doesn't come out right? We just have fun.
Yep. And how many times have I told you to make it wilder?
Wilder, yes. I appreciate that. I do. Right.
Yeah. Hey, if you're rendering galaxies and nebula, you know,
Right.
Go out there.
But here's another thing I just want to say to everybody who's in the show and everybody that I wrote you a note. Everyone is so different in the way we each approach our art, you know, and our time with you. And that's what you encourage. And you can see the variety and the love and the talent that goes into making each of these pieces. And you've never, and I've always loved that, you've never tried to make any of us like anyone else. You just help us excel at our personal vision. And I think that this show particularly shows that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I like to say, I find teaching art is a subversive way of giving someone themselves, in that it's an indirect way of, through this shared conversation of making art, that it's about self-discovery. And I take great pleasure in that, especially as it works. Okay.
Make us go back. Just want to say thank you very much to everyone. And I hope you engage with us again. And we look forward to having the next Northlight Art Center anniversary celebration. The show will remain up through July. That doesn't mean a lot right now because we have not reopened the museum, the Sharon Historical Society Museum, but stay tuned. We're in the process of planning putting together our plans for reopening partially or in different ways so that we can reach the community. Thank you for engaging with us on this online talk. Thank you so much. And please invite any of you to, if you have questions or feedback or concerns, please do reach out at the direct email you see on the screen or the phone number, as you always do. We always appreciate your feedback. Peter, thank you so much. This is a real gift having you here and having you give us that just very meditative and insightful tour of the student work and perspectives on art. So thank you. Thanks everyone, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Chris. My absolute pleasure. Thank you for putting this together. I know you did a lot in the background to photograph the work and create this presentation. So thank you very much.
Show, beautiful experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, to the gardens, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So,
Thank you very much.
thanks.
Thank you.